You are listening to Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan.
Hello, Canada and hockey fans of the United States and Newfoundland, and an extra big hello to Canadian servicemen overseas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs Fan, and joining me as always, my winger, Ricky Squid Vive. Squid, today we are joined by an ex-teammate of yours who in the 70s was part of the dynamic 1-2 punch with Boris Salmi, Ian Turnbull.
Yeah, the Hawk, he was, I'll tell you, he was a big, strong man, too. I mean, he wasn't that tall, but he was like a bear. He was built big and strong, and he was a bit of a prankster, too. He liked to have a good time. He liked to laugh and joke around. And I think sometimes the coaches that we had kind of looked at him and thought that maybe he didn't care because he was kind of a carefree guy, funny, and everything else. But boy, I'll tell you, when he got on the ice, it was all about winning and playing the best that he could.
Well, you talked about a couple of his pranks in your book, so we'll get to one of them in particular. There seems to be a little bit of a question on about so we'll talk about that when we got him come up in a few minutes. But just on a more somber note, we'd like to give a bit of a shout out to a big Leafs fan who's going through a rough time right now by the name of Ken Irons, who lost his wife of 71 years recently. And we just want to give Ken a shout out that, along with your son, Patrick, us here at Leaf Nation, along with Leaf Nations, wish you nothing but the best. Keep your head up and all the best to you, buddy.
Yeah, Ken, I mean, I can't even imagine what you're going through, but, we're here and we're behind you and like Mike said, keep your head up and, you'll get through this.
That's right. And so, I mean, again, it's just all part of Leaf Nation. And I did notice on social last night, a lot of people reaching out to Patrick and giving their best wishes. So again, all the best to you moving forward. So getting to our world of hockey, some movement before we get to the Leafs, particularly our old friend Berkey is picking up and has a new address in Pittsburgh along with Ronnie Hextall. What do you think of that move?
Well, I think it's a pretty solid move. Berkey had that position in Calgary as the president of hockey operations, and he hired Treliving, and he let him do his job. And I'm assuming he's going to do the same thing with Hextall. And Berkey's a pretty smart hockey guy, and I think that he's going to be a real big help to Hextall going forward. I think, because they're going to have to make some changes. They got some guys that are getting a little bit older now. Obviously, I'm not talking about Crosby or Malkin or Letang or any of those guys, but there's some other guys, and they got some good young players too. So, now what does that mean for the coach? And, there is something that, we've seen so many times. A new general manager comes in, and if they don't make the playoffs this year or they don't win the first round, may he be gone? And I don't know. I mean, that's a pretty good question. I think that could be asked to those two guys is what's going to happen going forward. Sullivan has done a great job so far, and I'm sure it's not that he all of a sudden, as most guys, they don't all of a sudden become bad coaches. It's just whatever they have on the bench. And, but I expect they'll make some moves with Berkey and them. And I think that they'll get things turned around there.
Well, it happened all pretty quickly. And if it goes according to as was suggested in the media and by Berkey himself was Mario. Brian gets a lot of requests from people questioning, I guess the awareness or the abilities of certain players or managers around the league, because he does have a real good eye for talent and knows what it takes to win and lose. And I guess Mario was saying, well, since Burke has so much information on all these guys and he's given us all this, why don't we ask him to join us? So, state the obvious, why don't you? But that's exactly what they did. And so good on them reacting that way and for acting that way. And yeah, Mike Sullivan, it'll be interesting to see what happens there because he does have back-to-back cups on his resume and a pretty good hockey squad. So we'll see. Now,
well, you're right about Berkey. He's a smart guy because he drafted my son. So
That's correct, too. That's exactly right, Justin. But we can back that one up. Well, don't look now, but we're at the quarter pole of the National Hockey League season.
Oh, boy.
Only 14 games, mind you.
Yeah.
But I think we got enough of a sample size to make a couple of opinions. Who's been a bit of a now we'll go, of course, we're referring to our Maple Leafs.
Yeah.
Who would you categorize as surprised so far this year on the positive side with the Leafs?
You know, the one guy that I think, based on last year, I think he's come out and he's played extremely well this year is Kerfoot. I see a lot more jump in his game this year, and he's playing a little bit more physical. He's making some things happen, and I mean, aside from the obvious, he's the guy that stands out to me as a guy that's really turned his game around from last year to this year.
Yep. So let's go to the other end of the spectrum. Who do you think is not living up to expectations so far?
Oh boy, that's a pretty tough one.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll tackle this one to start off with, so not to throw you under the bus. So I'll go with number 88. I think 88 has been a bit of a disappointment. Even though he's getting some points, he's too much of a perimeter player. And he looks like Tyler Cranston out there sometimes, flying around, circling around the rink. And the sad part is he has so much ability. He's got so much more to give. And I think in a way, I know this will sound crazy, but he's hurting Tavares to a degree because Tavares needs those muckers that are going to give him the puck and not just dish off all the time. And that's why, Johnny, well, look, Johnny last night, the 2 grinding goals.
Yeah.
And he was at his best. And that's what you're going to get the best out of John. So I think in a way, I know Nylander's got some points, but he's got to pick his game up and play better.
Well, I think he started out well. That's the thing. He had a strong start, but then, I have to agree with you 100% that, I think he's always been a perimeter player. I think he's always going to be a perimeter player. I don't think he's a guy that's going to be going into the corners and mucking and, grinding and that sort of thing. That's not how he plays. But if he's going to stay on the outside and not get quality scoring chances, then he's not going to be effective. And, and I agree. I think Johnny needs more guys like, at least one guy on the line that is going to go in and get that puck and muck things up down low and keep the cycle going and that sort of thing. Because Johnny, that's exactly what he does. And I guess Nylander would be a good choice for that, I would think. I mean, there's maybe a couple other guys that I could name, but and some of them that, like Lettinen and a couple other guys that maybe, at the American League had already been going like normal and everything else.
Yeah.
They'd be learning a little bit more playing down there and playing a little bit more. But unfortunately, they kind of had to keep him here and play him a little bit, see how he does. But I'm assuming once the American League gets going, those guys will probably find their way down there to get more ice time and get, climatized to the North American game.
Well, you can see, in Lettinen in particular, you can see there's definitely something there. He just got to get acclimatized to the new surroundings and to the new game and ice surface and all that stuff. So to me, I think he's a project worth sticking with for the time being. And you're right. He's got to get ice time. He just got to play. And if he gets some ice time at the American,
you got to play. If you're a prospect and a good prospect, you've got to play. And if you're only going to play 5-8 minutes a night in Toronto, you may as well be playing 18, 20 minutes a night with the Marlies and learning, how to be a good pro and how to play on the, if you're a European guy, how to play on the smaller ice surface, that sort of thing. So that it's invaluable what you can learn at that level.
Well, I will see. And again, we've got, I just see a note coming across that the Montreal game may get postponed for an hour or so tonight. And I know that's COVID stuff for the waiting for testing. So I don't know what that does to the game Saturday night, but we'll wait and see as we get through all this. But before we get to our man Hawk in the next couple of minutes, just thought I'd throw my usual sort of Maple Leaf stuff at you. And here we go. And on this day in 1993, Dougie Gilmour, a fan favorite, 6 assists leads to a 6-1 win against Minnesota. Gilmour's 6 assists in a game tied a Maple Leaf record set by Babe Pratt. Now, since Pittsburgh's been in the news this week. I thought I'd throw this one as an additive to that little story, that on February 13th in 1988, a kid by the name of Mario Lemieux, who we've heard of before, scored a goal with the Pens 2 men short and added 6 assists and a 7-5 win at Los Angeles. Not only with the 7 points, the 7-point game he had and all 7 goals, he also gave him 120 points in the season for a 17-point lead over Gretzky with 22 games left. 120 points.
Yeah, he was a pretty good player, Mario.
Not bad, eh?
Well, and I've always said, everybody talks about Gretzky's record and will it ever be broken and everything. And obviously it may someday, the way the game is changing and everything. But I always said if there was one guy that could have broke all his records or gotten very close had he stayed healthy and didn't have the cancer and all that kind of stuff, was Mario Lemieux, because he was as good as Gretzky, seeing the ice, as good a hands, but he was much bigger and stronger, so he could do things that Gretzky couldn't do. And so I think he, in my mind, if somebody was going to get close to all those numbers, which they look unreachable, it would have been Mario Lemieux had he stayed healthy through all those years.
I agree with that. And if he'd had the passion that Gretzky had for the game of hockey, Mario just always looked to me like one of those guys. He was just so good at it. He just did it. But Gretzky just lived, breathed, and ate, slept hockey, like from the time he was born to this day, he still does.
Yeah, I think Lemieux probably had that as well. I think much like Frank Mahovlich, I think people looked at him because of that long, kind of lazy looking stride that they didn't care. But I think that's probably false. I think they cared a lot. And I mean, if you looked at some of the games from the playoffs when they won their 2 Stanley Cups in a row, Pittsburgh, I mean, he took a beating in a lot of those games, but he kept on going and scored some big goals for them. So I think that's just something that people look at and think, God, he doesn't look like he's going 100%. Well, he is. It's just that he's big and tall and lanky, and it looks like he isn't. Well, everybody used to say that about Frank, correct?
Absolutely right, he did. But the thing about Lemieux too is he even admitted himself, though, Rick, that it wasn't until he played with Gretzky in '87 in the Canada Cup that he knew he learned how to win. It took more than just talent, and I think that woke him up. And then a couple of years later, obviously, he wins a cup with Pittsburgh. So he learned from Gretzky too, and that passion, and he got that instilled in him. But as far as
probably from all the guys on the Canada Cup, I mean, they were all good players and really hungry.
Yeah.
And don't forget, that was only Mario's second. He had only played 2 years in the league at that point.
That's right.
So
that's right.
When you look at that, I mean, you come in at 18 years old, you're the first pick overall, and it's like there's a lot of pressure. And then all of a sudden you go to a Canada Cup and you play with all these great stars that have won Stanley Cups over and over, and you learn those things. And those are things you probably would have learned anyway, but going to the Canada Cup just made it a little bit quicker.
Well, again, we hope that some of that will rub off on some of our guys coming into here, and our guys will pick up on that, and we'll see a little bit of that as we move along. But I think once again, it's time to bring our guest on. So let's go see what the old Hawk has to say. Squid, our guest today, enjoyed a 10-year career in the National Hockey League, including 9 with Toronto. His best offensive year was in 76-77, the career highs of 22 goals and 57 assists and an impressive plus 47 plus minor rating. And he also remembered, though, for the one, how about that? Plus 47.
Never saw very many of those in the 80s, that's for sure.
Well, that was the whole point of that little tidbit I put in there. But a game against Detroit, February 2nd, 1977, 5 goals and 5 shots. You 5 shots in the first period and not have a sniff. Well, how about that?
I mean, that's incredible. 5 goals in a game, especially on 5 shots. But I remember
as a defenseman.
Yeah, as a defenseman for sure. I remember one night in Vancouver, we're playing against Atlanta.
By the way, folks, our guest is Ian Turnbull.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a name.
Ian, how you doing? How you getting through the pandemic?
I'm doing all right. This is my new fashion statement. Can't go anywhere without this. Very nice, stylish, matches my shirt. Really nice.
No little maple leaf on the side though.
Well, yeah, I wore blue today for sure.
Okay, that's what now. Okay, are you still working at the dealership?
Yeah, I'm the IT director there. Although I only work 4 days a week, so I'm scaling it back a little bit. But yeah, I take care of all of the computers and Wi-Fi systems and everything else. So.
Well, before we go any further, Squid and I love nicknames, and now you have one. I mean, obviously, anybody shortens a name. Wilson, Wills was my nickname. Bull for Turnbull, but you got one, I believe, Hawk. How did that all come about?
Hawk came from a game in Boston early in my career. Red Kelly was the coach, and somebody got sick and we couldn't get a replacement, and he was a left winger. So Red came to me early in the morning skate, and I was a kid rookie, and of course you wanted to play no matter what. So he asked me if I could play left wing, and I said, of course, sure, I can play left wing, no problem. So he said, okay, well, we're going to try you at left wing tonight. So anyway, Howie McKenney was one of the funniest guys I ever played with, but I think you guys had him on the show.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
I think he called me a piece of work, but I mean, you talk about the pot calling the kettle. Anyway, so I said to Howie, I said, man, I think I just screwed myself. I told Red I can play left wing, and I have no idea. He says, well, what you got to do is think of your favorite left winger. And I said, okay, that's easy. Bobby Hull, Chicago Blackhawks. So, Howie goes into a whole thing about how Bobby Hull would come into a room and he'd light up the room and he'd smile and say, hi, how are you, Bobby Hull? Nice to meet you, all like that. And he said he always had his pinky hanging out on his gauntlet. So I said, okay, I got it. So it turns out, come game time, I go and sit on the bench, and Red goes, no, get out there. You're going to start. You're going to start on left wing. So they dropped the puck. It went back to our D, and I took a couple of strides up the ice, and the D hit me with a nice pass. I went in on Jerry Cheevers, and I scored. Very, 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 very first shift out of the gate. So when I came skating back, Howie was yelling at me going, way to go, Bobby Hawk. So over the years, it got shortened from Bobby Hawk to Hawk. So it has nothing to do with my nose, as you can tell.
Well, that's a pretty good one.
RV, you got that good laugh going still. I love it.
Yeah, you're born in Montreal, but you cheered for the Detroit Red Wings growing up, I believe, as a kid, you told me. And you played for the
like Detroit and I like Boston.
Yeah.
Both of those teams were kind of my favorites. I really like Detroit because of Roger Crozier. And of course, when we were kids playing ball hockey, Crozier would be hanging off the crossbar. And so he was a great guy to emulate when you were playing ball hockey. And I always liked to be the goalie in ball hockey when we played. So, and of course, they had a pretty darn good team, with Apps and Howe and Sid Abel. And I mean, just, a lot of good players. So I always enjoyed watching.
You end up playing for the Montreal Junior Canadiens, and your last year journey, you end up in Ottawa.
Yep.
Just take us through that whole period leading up to the draft.
The Junior Canadiens at that time was in the OHA, which I think is the OHL now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Montreal was the only out of province team in the league at the time. And that particular year, they decided that they would go back and play in the Quebec Junior League. And it was coming on my last year of junior, and I was eligible to be drafted. And I kind of felt like I'd go a little higher in the draft if I stayed with the OHL or OHA as opposed to going to the Quebec League. So I opted to stay. And then it was a whole lottery thing. It was a whole crazy debacle about who was going to get me. And I wanted to play for the Marlies. They had probably the best team at the time, but the league said there's no way in hell you're going to go to the Marlies. So my rights went to Sudbury, the Sudbury Wolves, and I had no ambition to go to Sudbury. So I went, no, I'm not going to Sudbury. So anyway, somehow they finagled a deal with Ottawa, and I got to go to Ottawa, and I got enrolled in university there. So it worked out pretty good.
It's great.
Good. Yeah. So, I mean, you go through all that, then you get drafted by Toronto and spend a little bit of time in the minors, but not a whole lot. But we ask all our guys.
Actually,
what's that?
the only time I spent in the minors was after I had a knee injury. So the year I got drafted, I actually made the team.
Yeah, it was the next year I was looking at that you played 8 games or.
Yeah. Well, I started the year, and it was going really well, and then I got sandwiched between the Plager brothers, and tore all the ligaments in my knee. And I remember I was trying to break through, and it was like a football hit. One of the Plagers came low, the other guy came high, and I went ass over tea kettle, and had no helmet on at the time. We didn't wear helmets in those days. And I remember ending up in the net with John Davidson. And so Davidson looks at me and he says, "Hey, you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so." And then I got up and I tried to put pressure on my knee, and it was like a wet noodle. It was like flopping around like this. And I said, "No, I don't think I'm okay." But anyway, I just sort of waddled off, because in those days you didn't lay on the ice. You didn't tell anybody you were hurt.
Yeah.
So I just I made it to the dressing room, and the trainers said, "Yeah, that's not looking too good."
Well, we like to ask all the guys we have on, like there's obviously a moment or a period of time over a week or whatever where you finally realize, like, okay, I am good enough. Because everybody, you're not sure whether you're good enough to play with the big boys or not. And then there's always that moment or moments where you realize, hey, I am good enough. Where did that come for you?
Well, I think after training camp, that was the year that we had. I think we had 3 first-round picks.
Yeah.
And I think Jerry McNamara went over to Europe and got the Swedes, Borje and Inge Hammerstrom.
Yeah.
And so there were 5 of us at training camp, all rookies. And of course, that was the year that the Leafs lost the bulk of their D to the WHA, which had just come. And I think Jimmy Dory and Ricky Lee and a few other guys, they all opted out for more money, which is no big surprise playing in Toronto, right?
Yeah.
Especially back then,
yeah. Ballard threw money around like manhole covers, man. It was during that training camp, we played exhibition games and everything else, and everything was going pretty well. And there's just a realization that you're good enough to play, and you obviously from that point on, you work as hard as you can to stay there.
Well, I was going to say, Ian, like that year is the year they got Lionel McDonald, they traded and got Bob Neely, then you went. They also made the acquisition just of the 2 Swedes with Hammerstrom and Borje, but they also made the acquisition of Jacques Plante, Doug Pavel. So, I mean, there's some big changes going on.
Well, actually, what happened, I think Plante got traded, his rights were traded to Boston. And I think Boston's pick was me, the 15th pick.
That's right.
And we ended up getting 3 goalies that year. Doug Favell, Dunk Wilson, and Eddie Johnson were the goaltenders. So we had 3 goaltenders that year. None of them wanted to stand in the net in practice. They would just lean on the goalpost and wave their goal sticks. They didn't think that taking shots was part of their job.
Well, you've just ruined my whole story there because of the
Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I teased
I didn't mean to ruin it.
No, what I was going to say was going in with all those changes and all those draft picks coming in, that must have done wonders for your confidence going to camp, because looking at all these moves and what the Leafs had happened to the defense, as you just said and Rick pointed out, your expectations must have gone even beyond what you thought of making the hockey club.
I mean, because of all those vacancies, there was a huge gap on defense. Yeah. So, my chances of sticking as opposed to being shipped off to the minors was pretty good. But of course, it was entirely up to me. You had to play well enough to stay. Yeah. I mean, that's always been the rule.
Now, when you watch Salming for the first time, what'd you think of him? Honestly,
terrific. And actually, I can't explain it, but we meshed right away. And incredible talent, that guy. I mean, and a physical specimen, as they say.
Well, we had him on the show not too long ago, Ian, and he looks like he can still play.
Oh, I know. He used to piss me off. I mean, we go out and have a few drinks, and I'd put on 10 pounds, and he wouldn't put on anything.
He did that to a lot of guys.
He sure the hell did.
Now, Ian, coming out of junior, besides the obvious, the talent level, what was the biggest adjustment you thought you had to make to stay at that level?
Just the tempo, and body size. I mean, you're playing against men. When I played junior, I was one of the bigger kids, and my last year I played with Dennis Pudvan, and the two of us were like men playing against kids, really. And once you got to the bigs, I mean, there's a lot of guys that were, you couldn't just bash them around because they were big guys. So, that was the biggest adjustment is you're playing against seasoned veterans.
Squid, what about you?
Yeah, it was.
Sorry to cut you off, Ian.
I wasn't the biggest guy. I mean, I went to the WHA probably at 6'1", about 100. I don't even think I was 170 pounds. But a year and a half, 2 years later, I was 195. So I mean, just from practicing and playing and working out a little bit more. I mean, I put on all that weight over a period of about a year and a half, roughly, and then I felt a lot more comfortable. But because I wasn't one of the bigger guys. Like when I went to junior at 17 years old, I was 155 pounds, and so.
Well, that's the thing. You have to grow into your body, and in my case, I grew into my body when I was like 14. I mean, I was pretty much 190 pounds and 6 foot at like 14 years old. And I played junior from, 13, 14. I started playing junior hockey. And but a lot of guys, I mean, they don't bulk up and they don't fill out till they're in their early 20s.
Yeah.
And that's just sort of a natural progression, I think.
No, I say it, except for today's game where they have their own strength and conditioning coaches and skating coaches and all kinds of different coaches for everything. And they're coming in at 18 now, and they're strong. They're, maybe if they're not big, but they're strong.
There's no comparison. I don't remember. Did you end up going to Waterloo with Roger and for all that VO2 testing and all that stuff? No. That was before you, I think.
Yeah, I didn't have Roger.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to remember. It's been a long time, right? So
It's only been 40 years, Hawk. It hasn't been that long.
Yeah, you guys can remember. Well, I was going to ask you, speaking of which, if you can remember this, Ian, you grew up in a hockey mad city of Montreal. So
Yeah.
maybe, you were used to the craziness and the nuttiness, the following of the Habs and all that kind of stuff. Then you moved to Toronto, another hockey crazy city. But what was your early impressions from being at the home games and even on the road as a Maple Leaf? Was it beyond your expectations or as you would expected?
no, it was the way I expected it. When I was playing junior in Montreal with the junior Canadians, we outdrew the Canadians in attendance. So we were used to playing in front of 18,000 people. Same when we came to Toronto with the Marlies. Montreal junior Canadians against the Marlies was 18,000 people, and that never, I always blocked all of that out. Fans didn't faze me one way or the other. I just, you still have to play the game, so you block it out. Good, bad, or indifferent.
Well, I was going to say my next question here is that there must be something in North American water for the early part of the month of February, because February the 9th, 1964, the Beatles played Ed Sullivan for the first time and changed music forever. February the 7th, 1976, Daryl Sittler had a 10-point game, all-time record, hasn't been broken, close a couple of times. He even got on the score sheet that night with a goal. And then February 2nd, a year later, 1977, you scored 5 goals on 5 shots for an NHL record. Maybe give us a little insight into what you were feeling as a teammate of Daryl's when he was going through his special night. And then a year later, the shoes on the other foot, and you're having this extraordinary night on the ice.
Well, there's no way in hell you plan it, okay? In Sittler's case, he was so pissed off at me because I was late picking him up. and we all used to drive in from Mississauga, and the night that he scored all the points, we were running late, and I overslept a little bit. And then, of course, I picked everyone up, and I said, "Oh yeah, by the way, guys, I got to stop for gas." So I had to stop for gas. And then the kid that was attending to us said, "Can I check your fluids?" And I said, "Sure, go ahead." So he checked the fluids, and he mistakenly put some oil in the radiators. So he said, "It'll only be a couple of minutes. I'll drain it, and it'll be good." And I said, "Yeah, okay, go ahead." Well, by this point, like, Sit is just going crazy. We got to get to the rink. We got to get there. I'm never driving with you again, you son of a bitch. So we sat together, and at the end of the game, he ended up with 6 goals and 4 assists, so 10 points. So I came in after the game and I said, "Sit, see, I told you getting to the rink early is overrated."
Speaking of that, it's funny you talk about getting to the rink early, because when I went to Chicago, got traded there, Steve Larmer, he used to, and I used to like getting there early too, to get my sticks ready and everything. And
right.
So then it became like a contest. And I said to him, I said, "Hey, Larms, why are we wasting money on cabs all the time? Why don't we go together? I'll even let you walk in first if you want to, and say you were here first." So we used to sit in the stands and back then have a cigarette, tape up our sticks, and,
right.
and get ready for the game.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, but as the Sittler game was going on, though, what was going through your mind as those goals were going in the assists? Were you just aware of it, or was it just the game just buzzing by you? And then your own night when the goals were going in, you're like, was this just a blur?
Yeah, you're just playing the game. As they say, stuff happens, right? You don't show up at the rink saying, "Hey, I'm going to get 10 points or I'm going to score 5 goals." There were plenty nights I had equal opportunity to score 5 goals and nothing happened. You hit a goal post or whatever, right? So, you never plan these things, but whatever, every now and then the stars align and everything goes well. And you ride with it. You just, I remember the 5th goal, talking to Boria, and Boria said, "Hey, if the face-off comes back to me, you beeline it down through the middle, and I'll hit you with the pass." I said, "Okay, let's do that." And it turned out, and he hit me with a perfect pass at the blue line. I mean, you don't. That's in no playbook. Any coach.
No, I hear you.
You don't send your D down the middle off a face-off.
Unless he's got 4 goals.
Well, unless he's got 4 goals, and then it's okay. You get a green light from Boria.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me put it this way. You once told me.
Hold on. Boria is probably about the only guy on the team that could give a green light without having to worry about getting traded by one Harold Ballard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, maybe Squid, you can answer this too. So tell me this one, Ian, and you can answer this one too, Squid, is you hadn't watched the highlights of those 5 goals for years when you and I met in LA when I was following the Leafs a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And some guy sent the video to you and showed them to you. And as you said, you're watching me kind of chuckling, said, they sure didn't look on video like they felt going in the net that night. And you're kind of laughing about how kind of easily the goals were going in.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I said, I think what's your sports, TSN or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Some guy came to LA wanting to interview me. And so I did an interview with him doing, my recollection of the 5 goals. And I had never seen them. So I had no idea. All I had was, my visual take of it, my memory. Okay. So he matched the interview with the video, and he sent me a copy of it. And that was the first time I had actually seen the goals. And I was laughing because the interview had been pre-recorded. And then when I started watching the goals for the first time, I said, wow, that's not what I thought. So it was just pretty hilarious. And that was like 30 years later. So, I never really thought, I was out in LA. I didn't even think about hockey, to be honest.
Squid, you have a couple of those. You probably have a few of those.
Oh, I imagine there's a bunch of them that I would describe if I was being interviewed as, highlight real goals, and then you see how they went in, like Ian said, and they're nothing what you would describe them yourself. And but I agree with one thing. Like I was doing a thing this morning for a charity with Gary Lehman, and we were talking about 50 goals. And I said, well, I mean, you don't start the year thinking about scoring 50 goals. The year before I had 33, and the goal is, okay, I want to be better than I was last year. So if I get 38 or I get 39, well, okay, that's good. I want to get better every year. You don't go into the season, or you don't go into a game thinking I'm going to score 5 goals or I'm going to score 50 goals this season. It's kind of like, it just kind of happens. It's like one of those unbelievable things that you don't think you're going to do it, but it organically happens.
Yeah. And you don't question it at the time. I mean, you just roll with it. I mean, I know RV, you knew certain nights you were on, man, and you would just go with it, and good things would happen. And then there were nights that, you'd have all kinds of chances. And I mean, you couldn't put it in the ocean.
Like I was
and
saying,
that's just the way. Yeah.
When I was in Vancouver, and we're playing against Pat Riggin in the Atlanta Flames, and Pat was my roommate in Birmingham. I had 14 shots on goal that night and came out with 0 goals. And so he got the upper hand on that one, the son of a bitch. And then I think the next time I played him, I think I scored a hat trick the next time, so got him back.
Well, I can tell you guys this. It's the opposite in my beer league hockey, because goals going off guys' asses, skates deflected, hit 3 skates, a post, and go in the net. But in the bar 2 weeks later, it's through the whole team and upstairs. Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So it works the opposite in the
the stories always get better with time. It's like fine wine.
Well, speaking of stories, here's one for you. The 78 playoffs against the Islanders. Boria gets hurt.
Yeah.
You step up and play the best hockey of your career. But I got to ask you this. It may be a tough question to answer because you've kind of answered already with your 5-goal game. I'm sure the mood was not particularly upbeat when it was official the Borja result. I'm sure that management, the fans, and even some of the players thought, boy, oh boy, we're going to be done now. But you just seemed to pick it up. But was there something inside that you just said to yourself, now's when I can really show my mettle as a player. I'll step up. I've really got to take my game to the next level and just push yourself to be even better?
No, I think the only difference was that Salming wasn't there. I played some pretty good hockey with the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yes, you did.
Borja and I had 80 points almost each one year. I mean, what defensive pairing can you think of that, put up those kinds of numbers? But Borja had a whole different style. So when we were out together, the best analogy I have is that you're either the lead in the show or you're the side man. So, my role was to do what I could do, but I was still playing pretty goddamn good hockey. And the only difference was that he wasn't there and I was more visible. And of course, without him, my ice time was, pretty substantial. I was on all the time. And so I was playing, power play and penalty killing and doing everything else. And, I remember distinctly when we got to the 7th game and we got into the overtime, I kept thinking to myself, hey, we got to end this early. Because I said, there's no way in hell the longer it goes against the Islanders, we're not going to have any chance in hell. And as it turned out, I remember the Islanders were coming back out of their zone, and I would have normally backed up on this particular play. And for whatever reason, the forward sort of dropped his head for half a second. And I raced up to him and I kind of caught him by surprise. And that's when I got the puck, and Lanny was actually trapped. Like he was trapped in the zone, and he was skating like hell to try to get back into the play. And I ended up with the puck and I just threw it at Lanny. Like I could see him coming, and I literally, like, I couldn't lay a pass to him. I just rocketed it right at him, and he caught it. And he turned and he caught the 2 defensemen flat-footed. And that's another tape I hadn't seen forever, but I realized when I saw it, I remembered what happened. And sure as shooting, Lanny goes in, and Lanny comes in on a breakaway. He's going to score majority of the time. And that was everything. That was like that was the pinnacle of my career at that point, because that's exactly what we were trying to achieve collectively as a team. We wanted to win. We wanted to compete. We wanted, you always want to win a Stanley Cup. I mean, that's why you play. At least that's the way I played.
Well, I was going to say to you though, Ian, and again, I think you're being a slight modest here on that with your play, because you did play exceptionally well. With you and Borja, 80-point type guys, and that's almost unheard of in hockey. It is unheard of in hockey in today's game for 2 defensemen on the same team. But you would agree it's much easier to cover one of those guys than have both of them on the ice at the same time. So that had made your job a lot tougher, or a lot easier for the Islanders to defend against. So for you to take your game to that next level is something that you can hold your head pretty high on. And speaking of which, Bruce Boudreau told me that he didn't even play in that last game, but he said it was probably one of the greatest moments and highlights of his career as a Maple Leaf. But the celebration on the way home on the plane is something he'll never forget. Can you add to that part of the story?
Yeah, I don't know. It was a celebration. we did a lot of celebrating, right, RV?
Yeah, win or lose.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you got the point. Now, what happened against the Canadiens? The team just ran out of gas. Was just emotional letdown? No,
I mean we were broken and crippled.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
I mean, I remember having my hand I had to have it shot up with cortisone. Otherwise I couldn't hang on to my hockey stick. Lanny, I think, had a broken jaw. I mean, the guys were like, we were the walking wounded when we got out of the island. And of course, the Canadians had been sitting there for a week and change, you know.
Yeah, and they
well
weren't a
rested.
bad hockey. They weren't a bad hockey
And they were
team.
Oh, they were a pretty good team, you think?
Yeah.
So I mean, you know, there was no way we achieved a level, but we were nowhere near the Canadians. And of course, they were winning, like, I think they won like four Stanleys in a row. I don't know, 5, yeah.
Well, 5 in the 70s.
And they were great.
5, they
Yeah.
won 5
Yeah.
in the 70s.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember, you know, I just remember that you'd be playing your ass off trying to beat these guys. You'd think you were in the game, and then they'd wake up and go, oh no, 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 and then they fill your net.
Well, so let's just talk about the team at that level. All of a sudden that year, like, I come out, the expectations, I know in the city were up, but they're always high for Toronto, but they were exceptionally high. The players must have had a real good sense going home because you knew you were close. So with the team on the verge, Anders Hedberg and Ulf Nielsen wanted to come to Toronto. Ballard wouldn't sign them because he, you know, said he couldn't afford them. He then does his usual. So, hey, listen, I'm reading a book right now.
He always pleaded poor. Are you kidding me?
Hey, boys, I'm reading a book right now on the battle for control of Maple Leaf Gardens. I haven't read it before, and boy, it'll turn your head. Anyway, he was doing his usual fashion of nonsense, brings in Punch Him Black. All of a sudden, everything starts to go array. I guess the one good thing, if you got to play the guy who's in the screen next to you on the screen here for a little bit. But what was going through your mind when all this stuff was going on?
Well, I mean, I was extremely disappointed because, you know, we had worked hard for 6-7 years since I turned pro to become a competitive hockey team. And here we were, you know, like I said, we felt like we got somewhere beating the Islanders, but we were still like a couple of players away from really, really having a good contender. And I just remember at the time that, you know, I really didn't know what was going on, but I also knew that Ballard wasn't really happy with, how do I put it? Some of the players maybe had a little too much say about what was going on. And I don't think Ballard liked that too much. And he, you know, again, and he was under a lot of pressure because the guys were getting to a point where they were trying to, you know, they were commanding a little bit more money, and he didn't want to pay for a winner, is the way I always sort of took it. He didn't want to pay for a winning team, but his plan was just to bring Punch in, dismantle the team. He got rid of McDonald and Sittler and, you know, a bunch of other guys, and then it just the doors kind of opened, and he, you know, the team was dismantled basically.
Yeah, for me it wasn't disappointing because it brought me to Toronto, and unfortunately, I got traded.
yeah, but you see, RV had. I mean, you were one of the fitters that I was just talking about.
Yeah,
you know. So, you know, if they had not done all of that stuff, you quite possibly could have been dealt here anyway. And to have you go on and score 50 goals for what, 10 years? Did you do that in a row?
no,
But you know.
But you could, might have been the difference.
I mean, a 50 goal guy on our team with, you know, Sittler and McDonald and the likes. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah.
So now, how was your relationship with Harold through all of that? Did you ever have any discussions with him to view some of your thoughts?
No, Harold called me Bob for my first 2 years. And then he realized he was calling me Bob, and he came up to me one day and he said, Ian. I said, yeah. He says, well, I've been calling you Bob. I said, yeah, I know. He says, well, why didn't you say anything? I said, well, I don't care what you call me. As long as you pay me every second week, I'm okay with it. And I walked away. And that's when he started liking me a little bit, because he just laughed. You know, I stopped him in his tracks, and I just went, yeah, okay. And then he would come by, and he would say, like, what do you think? And I'd go, nah, I don't get paid to think, Harold. I said, it's your ship. You run it the way you want. Don't ask me. So
Now, Ian, can you say the same thing about Punch?
Well, I negotiated my contract with Punch, and you know, I really didn't know the guy. I mean, other than, you know, I was in the middle of a contract. You know, all hell broke loose, and then I was still in the middle of a contract, so I had to go in and negotiate with him. And in those days, this is when Eagle was doing all his stuff, and a lot of agents were double dealing, double dipping. I mean, it was a pretty dirty business in those days. And anyway, I went in, I started talking to Punch, and he says, where's your agent? I said, I got rid of him. He says, good, I should give you more money then. I said, well, that would be okay. So, but
well, we didn't have the luxury of salary disclosure back then either, which, you know, was a big reason why.
Yeah, I never, yeah, you know, like, you know, when I was playing in those days, you know, it was really nobody's business what you were making. And then after, you know, this disclosure, I mean, you know, everybody's on a chart. So you're just like, you know, they're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges. And if you're this, you're worth this, and which is, you know, ultimately good for the guys. Yeah. Obviously, I mean, gee, the money they're making now, I mean, gee, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, Ian, that name, there it is again, Squid, that Eagle name comes up all the time for some reason, and not in a good light ever. Any dealings with Mr. Eagleson over your time?
Well, I mean, Eagle had almost all the guys on the team except for Boria and myself and maybe one or two other guys. So he basically block negotiated for the whole roster. He had everybody, you know, Henderson, Ullman, or Ellis, Sittler. I mean, Jimmy McKinney. I mean, Pellick. I mean, everybody. Glennie. So I mean, he ran the roost, and then he was, of course, on top of that, he was running the Players Association, and of course, all of his guys were the reps at the time. I was not a very much of a fan of Eagles.
Yeah, I don't think there was too many.
I always felt he had too many hats on all the time.
Yeah, you're not telling us anything we haven't heard too many times.
Yeah, no kidding. So Ian, I get to Toronto. I mean, it's like a circus at that point in time. And of course, all Daryl's buddies are getting traded. I got traded for one of them, in Tiger. Yeah. And he brings in a guy named Carl Brewer. And I remember in practice one day, we were doing it. Okay, hold on a minute. I want you to describe what happened during that drill we were doing, the skating drill.
The skating drill, the infamous skating drill?
The accident.
Are you talking about the net accident? Anyway, here's my recollection, okay? We're racing for whatever reason, and I was not a good practice player, as RV well knows. I was not big on practicing, but we were racing, and they had brought Brewer in, and I think he was only 43 or something, but you know, from our perspective, he might as well have been 100, right? So, you know, we're skating, and I'm just trying to stay ahead of him. I don't want to go as fast as I want to go, but I wanted to stay ahead of him. because I didn't want him to pass me. So I can hear him chugging, and he's coming up behind me, and I going, he's just hell bent to beat me. So we came around. They used to pull the nets away from the boards in the corner, right? So I remember that I took a really sharp turn around the net to try and make a cut up the ice and get going. Well, I grabbed the goal post, okay, and used it for a little bit of leverage. But unbeknownst to me, as I pushed, the net spun and went the opposite way. And so Brewer was right behind me. And so the net kind of went 180, and the goalpost caught Brewer, and he was coming around the corner with his head, because I remember it was, and the corner of the crossbar caught him right on the melon, and he was bald, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it was just this great explosion of blood, right? And I went, oh no, wow. But that was a pure accident. You know, I got accused of doing it on purpose, and that was never the case at all. It just was one of those things that happened.
Well, it was a funny story because I remember standing around after and we were looking, and we went up to the net, and there was actually skin on the goalpost. And I think he got about 30 stitches, something like that.
Yeah, so it was a nasty gash, as they'd say.
yeah.
Well, now that we've cleared that one up, now November the 11th is a Remembrance Day, but it's all a Remembrance Day for you also, Ian. That's the day you got traded to LA for Billy Harris and John Gibson. Now,
Right.
Did you know that was coming, or did you sense it, or were you a part of it, or how did that all unfold for you?
Well, I actually helped orchestrate that.
Okay.
Yeah, through a go-between. It was time for me to move on. I had been traded so many times, it was ridiculous, and then it never came to fruition.
Yeah.
And I finally said, you know what, I just need to move on. And so anyway, wasn't playing too well. It wasn't a good time in my life, and so we ended up, a mutual friend of mine ended up talking to George McGuire, and I guess they put out some feelers and asked if I'd be interested, and I said sure, that would be great. And so they were able to put a deal together. So I wasn't surprised, because I sort of had, I won't say I had a hand in it, but I had some pretty good intel that this could happen. So I said, absolutely, if you can put it together, let's do it.
Well, it's one thing to think about it and talk about it, but then when it happens, you end up in LA, and you come from two hockey mecca markets that you grew up in and played in. It must have been a culture shock when you went to LA.
It was in terms of hockey. Yeah. I mean, it was like, totally different environment. I mean, it was eye-opening. Even with the guys and stuff, it was a totally different environment. The Toronto guys were a pretty tight-knit group, and they would go to lunch together and hang out together and go out to dinner and whatnot. And the LA guys, when I got here, LA is such a big place, they would be living all over the place. So they were not tight at all. I mean, after practice, 20 minutes later, they were all gone. No one was anywhere. So it was a cultural shock. And then of course you show up at the rink, at the Forum, the fabulous Forum, and there'd be 8,000, 8,500 people after playing years in front of sold out stadiums. Was different, but it was nice, and I did enjoy it, and it was a breath of fresh air. And I actually was really starting to get my game back together, and it was nice. I scored 4 goals too with Kings. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah,
I did.
Yeah, and they were much better goals.
We haven't looked at the video yet.
They were much better goals. I'm telling you right now. They're way better goals. I think it was Glenn Hanlon.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously that must have been one heck of a 180 from being in Toronto. And then I still remember, and I think you guys practice at Culver City as well, where I mean, you're skating down the ice, and literally the ice is like this with the bumps and everything. It was just horrible. I'm sure it's not like that now, but.
No, their training facility is world class now.
Yeah, it is. It's great.
Yeah, it's a fantastic place. Yeah, as is the Staples Center. It's really nice barn. But yeah, I mean, I remember the practice rink. I mean, I think they had fishing net behind, no screen. It was like a fishing net, and the ice was terrible, and it was the dressing room was upstairs. They sort of cantilevered it, and it was all like plywood. It was like a shack. It's crazy.
I was going to ask you, when you moved out to LA and after you'd just gone through in Toronto and how disappointing it was at the end. I mean, as a player, I mean, as you said, you played some of your better hockey, was coming back and you started playing well. But after that early part before Punch got there and everything happened, did you lose something inside, like emotionally, that you knew as a player you could still play your game, but there was something with the control of the team and your destiny being controlled by some guy above you who could make some blundering mistake? It was out of your control. But did that take something away from you as a player and just sort of moralize you somewhat?
Oh, no question about it. I mean, I think, I think I can't speak for every player, but you're there to compete and do the best you can and get as high as you can in terms of standings and whatnot. And when you feel like the carpet's been pulled from under you, you're obviously a little disappointed about it. And that was basically where I was at, because here I was thinking, man, we had worked so hard to get almost there, and then it was just gone, Yeah. And it was disappointing. There's no question.
Yeah.
Can you add to that, Squid? You were part of that.
Well, I was part of that, but then I was kind of part of what I thought was a rebuild. But unfortunately, like Hawk was talking about, like we had a general manager that brought people in when they weren't ready to play in the National Hockey League, and that ruined their careers. And, we drafted some pretty good hockey players that probably should have went back to junior for a couple of years and came back a little bit stronger mentally and physically. And they didn't do that. And, that made us a worse team. Like, I think if they had done things properly, say from 81 or 82 to about 86, the only guy that was really ready to play was Wendell. You look at Jim Benning, Gary Nyland, Boynstruck, Bob McGill. You look at you on and on.
Yeah, I remember RV. I remember those kids coming in and just thinking, man, they're really young.
Oh,
and because I remember Benning and they touted him as like the second coming of Christ, right? I mean, a lot of pressure on a kid, and same with what's his name,
Boynstruck. Freddie Boynstruck.
Yeah, same thing. And then who was the other kid? Big kid.
Bob McGill and Gary Nyland.
McGill, Bob.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of kids, but I agree with you, RV. I looked at them and I said, man, they got some talent, but boy, they're not ready to play here.
And that was frustrating as hell. I mean, to go through that whole period where we drafted pretty good. I mean, here we are, we're trying to build something. Then we get to 1986 and we have a decent run. We lose in the second round to St. Louis, I believe it was, in 7 games. And we're just kind of starting to get momentum. Dan Maloney was our coach, actually. And he wanted a 2-year deal, and they'd only give him, Harold would only give him a 1-year deal. So off he goes to Winnipeg.
Right.
And now we got to start all over again. So, I mean, I know how frustrating that must have been for you, because it was for all of us as well.
Well, I know you went through it. I mean, I was long gone by then, but the same ownership was there, and the same types of problems existed. And it was always, again, Ballard not wanting to cut loose with the money that was required. And that's, I mean, it always comes down to that.
Well, it does in anything we do in this life. And speaking of which, just on a lighter note, we want to thank you again. We got a few minutes left here to get a few with you in, but a couple of things. You once owned a popular spot near the gardens on Church called Grapes. Now I got to apologize to you because I called it Vines for some reason in my book.
Well, you know what? Vines opened up at the same time. And we were like the first 2 wine bars in North America.
Well, I don't drink wine, so I didn't know that. All I knew was Grapes was on Church, and it was
Grapes was the name of my place.
Yes.
And Don Cherry thought I named it after him.
Well, I can tell you that I got a couple of people that one guy read the book. My book, at least one person anyway, read it. He said that he spent a night there. You guys got beat out by Philadelphia, and he was there that night and had connected with Lanny McDonald. And he gave him some crafts of wine and some glasses. He kept all the glasses and the crafts.
Right.
And somebody else sent me a note a while ago and said that he also had some when they heard you were coming on the show. Did you want them back? And a girl I went to school with sent me a note and said, ask Ian if he wants a couple of glasses I took from Grapes. I keep calling them Vines.
Yeah.
So anyway, they still remember you. Down the street, a couple blocks, Brian Glennie, your teammate, he has he had his own place called Wheels.
Wheels. Yeah.
It was the converted gas station.
Yeah. I remember it well.
Okay, so there must have been some going on between two of those places. Would you care to share some of those with us?
See, I don't remember any of those very well.
Why would you?
So how did you get started on all that? Like, did you know you were going to be in that spot, and then Brian was going to have his own place, and then you got involved? Obviously, you like wine, so you got.
I was there. I was there first. We were right across the street. It was there was a bank of commerce, I think, on the corner. And anyway, the site was where the Golden Griddle came in.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it was a parking lot when I had it. It was a little house that we converted into a wine bar. And I had a lease with the guys that owned that parking lot. And had I not been traded, I probably would have had the Golden Griddle as my space. And so we took a flyer on it, and it was doing pretty good, and had a lot of fun with it. I mean, it was a nice diversion. And
or you get tired to go down the street to Brian Glennie's place, and he vice versa. He just swing back and forth. There must have been a lot of going back, but they probably wore the path out going back and forth on the sidewalk.
Well, I think we also went up to the Mug.
Well,
I did.
all I can say, one thing is you guys opened up places close enough for us to go to after practice, so we didn't have to go that far. So it was kind of nice of you guys to do that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Now, speaking of which, Ian, the fans still contact you and reach out to you for to sign stuff and ask you how you're doing and stuff like that these days?
Oh yeah.
You told me a funny story I wanted to get to about your 5-goal night. Somebody had you memorize something, or I want to say, I don't want to say mortalize, but immortalize maybe is the word, for a friend of theirs for the night of your 5-goal. Do you remember you had to sign that specific thing for them? They sent you a tile, I believe, from the ceiling.
Oh, yeah, that was like years later.
That's right.
Somebody contacted me on Messenger or something and asked if I would sign a ceiling tile, and I went, ceiling tile? What, where are we going with this? So I messaged back and I said, well, give me a little more information and I'll see what I can do. So anyway, as it turned out, this guy, the night I scored the 5 goals, was visiting a friend. And I guess when I scored the 5th goal, he jumped out of his chair and he knocked the ceiling tile out of this guy's basement. And said he was going to repair it, but he never did, and all like that. And the guy that owned the house, this would be like 40, 50 years later.
Yeah.
There was a nice old guy and his wife. And so he gave me the details and said, okay, can you jot a little note to them? Sorry about the ceiling tile, and then 5 goals, was whatever it was, February 2nd,
Yeah.
77, I guess it was. So
Yes.
yeah, so just do a little inscription, and he sent it to me, FedEx. So I said, well, if you send it return, I'll take care of it and I'll stick it in the box and send it back to you. So I did, and I remember, I think I still have a picture on my phone, but it was just hilarious of him giving it to these nice old couple now. And
Do you ever have one like that, Squid?
Oh boy, I tell you, I've been asked to sign so many weird things and body parts and you name it. And I mean, like people, like signing, like someone would say, well, sign my sneaker, or something like that. And it's like, well, I mean, it's going to wear off, and they don't even understand. They just want it signed anyway. So you do it, and but there was a bunch of times where I was asked to sign body parts, and said, no, I don't think that's a good idea.
That's not a good idea. No. Now, speaking of so jokes like that, now I hear you were quite the prankster in your time, Mr. Turnbull.
Oh, he was.
Yeah. So how about now, Squid? How about any of his pranks come to mind?
Well, I do believe that one of them was, and he had an accomplice, Hussey, and I believe it was Punch.
Battery cables.
Coming back from a road
Battery
trip.
cables.
Yeah.
Battery cables.
We get into the airport. They had pulled the battery cable off of his battery, and they're driving out and waving cables at Punch because he's standing there and he can't get his car started. And I thought, oh my God, this is.
And you wonder why you got traded.
Yeah, well, no, it was pretty. You know what? The thing I loved about when I got there was we had a bunch of really good guys that like to have fun. That wanted to win, but we also wanted to have fun and enjoy, being NHL players, and those types of things really lightened up the room and allowed us to kind of free ourselves up from all the pressure and, get out there and play the way we could play.
Yeah. Ian, anything to add before we let you go?
No, I'm done.
Well, listen. Spoken like a true interview. Listen, we can't thank you enough for coming on today. We enjoyed having you. Squid, any final parting shots for your ex-teammate?
No, I enjoyed playing with him, and in fact, my wife was talking to me a while ago, and she's looking after her grandson in Burlington today, and she said to say hello to you and Inga. And
oh, great! I've got two. I have 2 grandkids now.
Oh, do you? Yeah. Well, we just have the one, and he's 18 or 19 months. And his name's Hunter Richard Vive. So
nice.
Who knows?
Yeah, Yeah, say hello to Joyce for me.
Will do. And please say hello to Inga for us.
I will, buddy.
All
Hey,
right.
and again, thanks so much for joining us, my man.
Yeah, you guys are
well, thank you.
having fun with this. So I've watched a few. They're kind of fun,
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, thanks very much.
All right, take care.
Well, Squid, another one in the bag, and we've got the old Hawk. He keeps things close to the vest, but he's a pretty funny guy. You get a couple drinks in him, I'm sure that the stuff just comes out.
Oh yeah. I mean, the good times that we had together, and I should have mentioned it to him, and I completely forgot. It just didn't come into my mind when we were talking to him. But the time that we got storm stayed in Pittsburgh, we were chartering home, stayed at a hotel right by the airport, and you weren't allowed to drink in the hotel bars. But Floyd said, "Yeah, go ahead in the bar and have a few drinks." And we got in there, started drinking, and then I don't know, arm wrestling came up, and I knew Bill Lego's father was a Canadian champ. So I knew Billy was good from my time with him in Vancouver. So anyway, he beat Ian, he beat Paymon, he beat Dan Maloney, all those guys. We walked out of there with about $300 in our pockets each from betting against these guys. And they weren't very happy about that because they knew they were taken.
Now you told a funny story in your book. You told a funny story in your book about Ian about being about the dressing room. Do you want to share that one with us? But that we didn't get a chance to tell that one about Ian about answering a coach in a certain way when he came in the room with a body part.
I don't remember that.
The fart.
Oh, yeah. I can't even remember exactly how it went now. I mean, to be honest with you, I know it's in the. Yeah, I can't remember.
He came in and started crying, and then he came in and started barking at you guys, and there was silence, and all of a sudden he just leaned over and just ripped one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's when the team was kind of
Ian
were not going well at that time.
Ian did a lot of crazy things, funny things, but he was a great player, and unfortunately, when I got there, he was kind of getting towards the part of it where he wanted out, and unfortunately, I didn't see him at his best, because I think he wanted to get out of there so badly that I think it affected how he played. I mean, he was still pretty good, but I think he still could have been that much better had the circumstances been better,
Look what they're going through.
Well, that's what I mean.
I mean,
yeah, that's what I mean. Like, had he wanted to stay and played well under different circumstances, we might have been able to build a good team, because those young guys might have went back to junior, because we could have had those guys to bridge that gap. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And well, he said it best, and I've said it a million times, probably maybe 2 million, that the only reason why we never had success was because Harold didn't want to spend money. And that was what it all came down to with our boss.
That's well, and as I said to you, I've said to you 3 times like now, twice. This will be the second time in last week. Reading this book again about the Guards and how it was run, where he was trying to scrimp and save and cheat you guys out of your money and everybody else. He was missing other places. Yeah. It's just. Well, one example I'll give you guys, because I'm just absolutely astonished at some of the things that I've been reading. If it pushed to, there was no cash registers in the concession booths, if you recall, at the Gardens, so they had no control over what they were taking in the concessions. So everybody was robbing them blind, and they had no idea. They had the lowest per capita money spent in the league, next to Quebec, at Maple Leaf Gardens. Yes,
I had no idea that was going, because of course, I never went up to the concessions, so.
But meanwhile, he's cheating everybody, the players, and stealing the money. Like he was, skimming money, scalping tickets, and doing all nonsense. Like it's absolutely mind-boggling. It was going on in that operation for a franchise as iconic as it is. Yeah. And you wonder why the team didn't win. So anyway, another episode in the bag, in the can, or as they say, and. We want to thank everybody again for listening, and send us any of your comments or thoughts that you may have after listening to us. Only positive ones, please. We don't hurt our feelings. But Anyway, you can watch us on all your favorite podcast networks, Apple, Spotify, we're on Podbean, Stitcher, and there's a bunch of them. Listen to Squid and the Ultimate Leaf Fan. We'll be back again at you next week with another guest, and talk to you guys soon.